The Jewish nation is commanded to be a holy people, to be an exalted people, and to act differently than the rest of the nations. There are, because of that, certain halachas that apply to us that do not apply to any other nation. And there are many, many halachas and many circumstances that will occur if we violate those. One of the halachas that a Jew is obligated in that a Gentile is not is Lashon Harah. A Jew is not allowed to speak derogatory, defaming words about another Jew, and if he does, he violates at least a full lo saseh in the Torah. When the Beis Hamikdash is built, hopefully speedily in our days, there is an entire parsha of tsaras that applies to a person who speaks Lashon Harah. If a person spoke Lashon Harah, there are various things that occur. One is he gets a status of tumah, which is called tsaras. Part of it is a skin condition that manifests itself. He has to leave the machane. He has to step outside of the encampment of the Jewish people. He's separated. He's set aside because he has stepped outside of the role of being a Jew. When his condition seems to lessen and he's ready to be now mataher, there's an entire process that the Torah delineates how he goes through the kapara process. In one pasuk, the Torah tells us that there are a number of things that he has to do. The Kohen has to take 2 tziporim chayas, 2 live birds which are tahoros, a specific type of bird, a kosher bird, ve'etz erev, shnitlatz ve'ezov, as well as hyssop, cedar, and there's an entire process of making him now tahor, making him ready to re-enter the Klal Yisrael. Rashi comments that the birds that are part of the korban are tahoros, birds that are pure, birds that are kosher. And Rashi explains why is it that those birds the Torah specifies for him. Says Rashi, Lefi shenagoyim b'ayin Lashon Harah, because these afflictions, saras, comes because of Lashon Harah. Shumaise petute dvarim, which is a matter of prattle. When you speak, when you prattle, when you blab, you get the Isser of Lashon Harah. Lefika chusku kulos taras tziporim. Therefore, the Torah obligates him in the Torah process with birds. Shemefatatin tamid, because they're constantly prattling. The bird is constantly chirping. The bird is constantly making that noise because he prattled, because he blabbed. The appropriate atonement is to use a bird that also chirps. Therefore, those are the birds, the tahoros birds, are used for his kapara. And that's how Rashi explains why the birds are tahor. The question that I believe begs to be asked on this Rashi is, bird chirping has no connection to Lashon Harah. Lashon Harah is defaming, debasing. Lashon Harah is evil in the sense that it damages a person's reputation, causes them pain. As a matter of fact, the Rambam defines the very definition of Lashon Harah is words that damage, whether it be a person's reputation, a person's finances, causes a person tsar. Words that damage have no connection to the chirping of a bird. A bird chirping innocently, making sounds that have very little meaning, has no connection to words that destroy a person's reputation. And yet Rashi seems to say that the connection is the birds chirping and he chirped, therefore one is mechaper on the other. And the question is, that seems to have very little connection to our understanding of what Lashon Harah is. And I'd like to see if we can get a better understanding of what Rashi means by that. And to help do this, I'd like to share with you an interesting observation. Recently, my son was in school, and the special ed teacher oversees the entire school brought my wife and myself in and told us that my son needs occupational therapy. His handwriting apparently is very immature. He's now 6. His handwriting is immature. She felt that he needs OT to help him form the letters. Okay. Now, I as a parent will do whatever I can as an advocate for my child, and will certainly go through whatever process, and I agreed. But the difference between my wife's attitude and my attitude after the meeting was very interesting. My wife was very concerned. Oh my goodness, OT, he has to have a good handwriting, it's very important. And I was not at all concerned. And I'll share with you why it is that I was not at all concerned. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Now, if you ask that question to any law-abiding citizen, patriot in our country, they will tell you, hopefully, that Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. But if I ask you who penned the document, Who actually wrote the words? Most people say John Hancock, right? He's got that big signature right on the bottom right there. It's actually not correct. John Hancock did not pen the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was penned by Timothy Matlack. He was a professional penman. He was hired by the Congressional Congress to do the actual penmanship. But you see, back in those days, penmanship was a huge part of your success as an individual. Your handwriting represented you. A letter from you came in your handwriting unless you could afford a penman. And therefore, penmanship was a very integral part of being a successful person. Today, I write an average of 1 to 2 hours a day, whether it be my own notes, whether it be articles, and my handwriting is a 0. I make doctors jealous by my illegibility. My handwriting is so poor, I cannot read it myself. And yet it doesn't bother me. I spend an hour or 2 writing a day, and it has no relevance. Why? Because I don't write with a pen. I type. And I touch type pretty quickly, and it doesn't matter whether my handwriting is neat or sloppy or whatever, because we live in a very different world than did Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and Matlack, who penned the Declaration of Independence. And I want to share with you a little bit of the progression. In the 1850s, a lawyer would hire a scribe. They were then called a Scrivener or Scrivener. He was paid basically 4 cents per 100 word. Because in the 1850s, there was no system, even though there were printing presses, you couldn't run around with a printing press, so it was done by hand. Mark Twain was introduced to something that was invented by Remington called the typewriter. And I saw one of the original letters that he wrote to his brother. He said, "This darn thing can type as fast as I can write." It was astounding. The typewriter changed the way writers write. In the 1960s, IBM introduced the daisy wheel, the Selectric. That, if you ever remember seeing it, it was a ball. On the ball were the various letters, and it spun fast. Boom, boom, A, B, C, D. It could type 90 words a minute. 90 words a minute, an astounding, blazing speed, something that a scribe could never dream about, and something that the old-fashioned Remington keys could never imagine. We moved to a tremendous progression. Needless to say, in our day and age, 90 words a minute is not the output of your average printer. Laser printers today are now up to, are you ready for this? 200 pages a minute. As a matter of fact, the fastest laser printer now prints 330 pages a minute. It's expensive. It's $1 million for that particular model. But it's not unusual to see a laser printer print out a page a second, a slow one a page every other second. And I want you to understand what we're discussing over here. An entire book. You could take a 300-page book and print it in a matter of minutes. Hit print and the wheels go, the laser starts spreading, and boom, before you know it, you have an entire document printed out. Something that 100 years ago was unimaginable and absolutely beyond anyone's imagination. Now, I believe that that has some very real relevance to us. We work very hard and very diligently at mitzvahs. Most mitzvahs that we do take a lot of time. If you put on tefillin in the morning, you have to unroll it, wrap it, tie it. Then you take out your shorosh, you wrap it, you tie it. If you put on tzitzit, you have to make sure the knots are tied. You have to put it on. You pick up a little of an estrog. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into most of our mitzvahs. However, there's one area that the human being has a machine. It's called the mouth. The mouth moves at speeds that are astonishing. It is a powerful machine that rips through so many different things at such speed. And imagine with me for a minute a young fellow, name Yaakov, and he's putting on tefillin in the morning. And he's standing next to his buddy, and he takes out his shalyad, he puts it on, and he turns to his buddy and goes, "Hey, did you hear? Have you heard Moshe last night got stopped by the cops?" Yeah, he got stopped by the cops, and the jerk, you know what he did? He didn't even show his license. He had a license. He's such a blooming idiot, I can't believe it. He didn't show his license, and they arrested him. What a jerk. I can't believe he did this. You know something, I'll tell you the truth, it's just like his father. His father's also kind of stupidity. His father's also a jerk, just like him. He also does the same kind of thing. And I'll tell you the truth, it's not just surprising, because he comes from a shul in Flatbush. You know, most of the Jews in Flatbush are like that. Bunch of arrogant buffoons, they all should be arrested. But I think the guy's... And our friend goes on to daven the rest of Shabbos. Okay, now let's analyze what has just occurred. He put on a tefillin shel yad, spoke between the tefillin shel yad and shel rosh, which is a problem. And there are 1 or 2 mitzvahs maximum that you have accomplished with a shel yad and a shel rosh. But listen to what was going on in the background without him paying much attention to. That fellow Moshe is such a jerk. Boom! Destroyed a human being's reputation. He did something so stupid, just added a little bit more vinegar to the mix. Not just that, his father does the same kind of thing. Now he destroyed the boy and the father. But not just that, it's the shul. Not just the boy and the father, the whole shul. But not just that, the whole neighborhood. All of Flatbush are a bunch of pompous, arrogant buffoons. He just destroyed maybe 10,000 Jews. While he worked very diligently at one mitzvah called tefillin, his mouth rattled out numbers after numbers of averas at the same time. And if you study the speed with which the mouth works, you'll be astounded. Much like a laser printer that just rattles them out, page after page after page, outputs that are astonishing. The human mouth has such a speed to it and can accomplish so much damage that it's hard to imagine. However, the interesting thing about it is, I doubt he thought much about what he was saying. As a matter of fact, it was just sort of like prattling, just sort of like blabbing, hey, did you hear last night? And he sort of told a story. I doubt he really hates the fellow. I doubt he really meant to malign him. I doubt he really meant to defame him. He just sort of like told a story. The Chavetz Chaim in his Sefer writes as follows: most examples of Lashon Harah also violate something called Chilul Hashem. And he says, why is it that most times we speak Lashon Harah, it's a violation of Chilul Hashem? He says very frankly as follows: if you're starving and you eat a McDonald's cheeseburger, it's understandable. You had a real taiva, you were very hungry, you shouldn't have, but you succumbed, you did it, it's understandable. Most averas that we do, we have a real taiva for, a strong drive, a powerful pull. So if in fact we succumb, there's a reason, there's a rationale. But what is the taiva for Lashon Harah? 90% of the time that we speak, it's not because we hate the guy, not because we're trying to malign him, not because we're trying to destroy his name or reputation. It's just prattle, blabbing, just the mouth moves, the tongue moves, the output happens, the machine goes on autopilot, and we don't even think. Says the Chavetz Chaim, most examples of Lashon Harah are also a violation of Chilul Hashem, because there's no taiva, no desire. It's just that we don't care about it. We don't recognize it's wrong. Hashem says it's forbidden. You don't care. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that is a Chilul Hashem. I believe what this Rashi is telling us is a tremendous yesod, and that is most of the time that we speak Lashon Harah, it's not malicious. It's not with the intention of hurting someone. It's not because we want to defame them. It's not because we want to malign them. It's just because whatever. Hey, did you hear the story? Hey, I got to tell. Oh, you won't believe this. It's just prattle, blabbing. The mouth is on, and it goes. The tongue wags, but the damage is done. And the reason why the part of the Torah process is to bring these birds is because that's exactly what the Torah is teaching us. The bird is chirping mindlessly, just chirping, 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 filling the empty space with noise. Most human beings, when they speak about other people, aren't malintended. They don't really mean to hurt people. They're just filling the air, just blabbing, just going on, chirping. And that is one of the major causes of Lashon Harah. On the positive side, it's therefore quite easy to understand the solution. The solution is to become aware. The solution is to become aware of how powerful the tongue is, how much our mouth can do, and that could stop a lot of examples of exactly this problem. However, I'd like to share with you that the Chavetz Chaim tells us there are two major reasons why people speak Lashon Harah. Two underlying reasons. And when you hear these two reasons, I think it makes it even easier to deal with. Let me explain to you the first underlying reason. Imagine for a minute that your Rav calls an asifa, a major meeting of everyone in the shul. And he calls together the entire shul membership, and he stands up and he says, Rabbosai, I have some terrible news. I don't want to get into the hows, the what's, the whys, but at our shul dinner 2 weeks ago, the food was not kosher. But it wasn't like just a little bit not kosher. Instead of turkey, it was ham. Everyone in the shul ate ham, chazer, treif. I feel terrible. The Rabbo say we have to do tshuva. Okay. Needless to say, everyone in that shul would feel tremendous regret, tremendous remorse, feeling duped, feeling deluded. A chutzpah at a shul dinner, the guy puts ham instead of turkey. It's mamish. There'd be a lot of conversation, a lot of ruffled feathers. People would be pretty darn upset about it. And needless to say, there'd probably also some good. People do takhanas, people do tshuva, and some good would come of it. Okay, let's take the very same scenario, but a little different. The Rav gets up and says, Bosai, I want to tell you, so-and-so spoke Lashon Harah last week in our community, and it's not true. Let's say the Rav gets up and gives an entire shir about Hilchos Lashon Harah. How many people do you think will walk out, Oy vey, my goodness, I heard Lashon Harah. Oy vey, Zmir, somebody spoke Lashon Harah in my proximity. And the Chavetz Chaim spends almost an entire sefer on one focal point. His focal point is that Lashon Harah is as treif as tarfus. It's as much of an isser as eating treif meat. Lo seilech rochel b'mecha is a full lo to say in the Torah as much as not eating treif food. And as a matter of fact, it's a lot worse. Because the Chavetz Chaim goes through the count. Almost any example of Lashon Harah will not be a single lo say. You see, it's forbidden for me to speak Lashon Harah. But it's also forbidden for you to hear Lashon Harah. It's also forbidden for you to listen and be makabel, to accept it. But not only that, almost every example of my speaking Lashon Harah makes me violate Lifnei Ivra. I'm causing you to do an Avera, which is a second sin. You, by listening, are allowing me to speak, which is your second sin involved. Almost every example of Lashon Harah, as we said, involves Chilul Hashem. Almost every example of Lashon Harah involves many, many direct los assays, violates many assays, and as a matter of fact, the Chavetz Chaim does the count for us. 17 los assays, 14 assays, and 3 curses are the full sum total of the involvement that Lashon Harah will get you to violate. He says, granted, it's unlikely that you'll hit 17, 14, and 3 on any one conversation. Do it long enough, do it often enough, he guarantees you'll violate all of them. And this reality, I think, is a very, very powerful, eye-opening observation. And that is the primary reason why we speak Lashon Harah is because we never really understand that it's forbidden. I claim that most of us deal with Lashon Harah a little bit like dieting. Imagine you're at a wedding, and it's at the end of the wedding, the waiter comes by with the desserts. He's got a laden, a beautiful tray laden with the most delicious desserts. And he asks you, do you want it? And you say there, I should, I shouldn't, I should. All right, I'll have it. So most of us, that's what Lashon Harah is. I know I shouldn't. I should watch what I say. I should watch my cholesterol. I should watch my diet. And I should watch my tongue. But don't make it like it's really forbidden. Don't make it like it's a los to say in the Torah. Don't pretend like it's really absolutely like treif. But that's the whole point of the Chavetz Chaim Sefer, is to point out that it's far worse than eating treif. It is absolutely forbidden, worse than eating treif, and many times worse, because every single example of it ends up being many, many times involving many, many averas. And I'd like to share with you the fact that one of the key distinctions between Lashon Harah and eating treif food is the multiplicity of sins that are involved in any single act. I asked one of our lawyers for this legal opinion, and I believe it is true. If you take a gun, break into a liquor store, likely you are going to be held on many counts, each one differently. Number 1, possession of a deadly weapon. Number 2, breaking in an entry. Number 3, endangering life. There are quite a number of violations that you've been involved in, and many different counts which you can be accused and held trial for. But additional to that is the fact that if you hold up a gun to a number of people in the store, determined by how many people are there, will determine how many counts of endangering life you are to be accused of. If there are 2 people there, if there are 10 people there, if there are 20 people there, you've endangered that many more lives. And that is one of the very interesting and very sad facts about Lashon Harah. If I stand up in front of 10 people and tell Lashon Harah, it's not a single avera. I told over one story, but 10 people heard it. Automatically there are 10 separate losas because each Jew there is obligated in not listening. Each Jew is obligated in not accepting it. Each Jew is allowing me to violate by speaking Lashon Harah. Each Jew is involved in Chil Hashem in the sense that they could have easily walked away. I could have easily walked away. And the more people that are there, the more it increases, the more damage that's done, and the more direct violations of the Torah there are happening. And the reason I say that is because I'd like to share with you a perspective that most people don't really think about. A number of years ago, there was a butcher in Muncie who was found to be selling treif meat. And it wasn't a little bit, and it wasn't just once. As an ongoing, regular situation, he was selling treif meat to the entire community. He was a butcher who sold to many bar mitzvahs, to many weddings, to many yeshivas. He was a very popular butcher, and it was found out that he had been selling treif for a very long time. And it was a tremendous upheaval in the community because literally thousands of Jews ate treif meat. And if you would ask anyone afterwards, what was your reaction to that fellow? Almost everyone I encountered just couldn't believe it. How could the guy do it? What kind of heinous creep? How can you do that? Thousands of Jews are going to eat treif because of you to make a little money, to save money. And how could you deal with such a horrific person? What kind of vile creature? Now, whether that's correct or not, I'd like to share with you that I guarantee that there are many people that you know well who have a far worse situation on their hands, who are violating Torah principles to a much greater extent, and in the world to come will have a lot more to answer to. If you have a person who's a Baal Lashon Harah, Baal Lashon Harah is a gab about. He loves to tell stories. I got to tell you the story. Oh, you got to hear about this guy. You won't believe it. He tells 10 people in the morning, 10 people at night, 10 people in mid-afternoon. Those 10 people tell 10 other people. Those 10 others tell 10 others. And before you know it, the entire town knows exactly what he's saying. What I'm saying to you is each violation is far worse than eating treif. Each violation is literally dozens, if not hundreds, of direct violations of losas in the Torah. Each example and each time it's repeated, it's a repetition of it. And you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of averas, far worse than eating treif on a regular basis. But no one looks at him as a creep. No one looks at him as a heinous criminal. No one says, what kind of Russia are you? And again, there's only one reason. And that is because in our mind, in our understanding, Lashon Harah is like, it's like dieting. You shouldn't do it. It's not nice. Come on, you shouldn't speak Lashon Harah. Come on, watch your cholesterol. Come on, you gotta, let's not push it, really. If we had an understanding, as Chazal do, of the absolute Isser, the absolute prohibition, the fact that it's 100% Usser, I don't think that would be our attitude. We'd see it as a tremendous damage that it is, and we would have a very different attitude towards it. But here's the question. Why does the Torah put so much weight on this Avera? What's so horrible about it? After all, it's just stories, just telling tales. It's not such a terrible crime. Why does the Torah put such emphasis on this particular sin? And I'd like to share with you what I believe the reason for this is. There's a Gemara that tells us the first base of Mindless was destroyed because of sin, because of Gilarayas, Shvichas Damim, and Avodah Zarah. The first base of Mindless was destroyed because of idol worship, murder, and illicit relations, the three cardinal sins. The second base of Mindless was destroyed because of sinas chinam, baseless hatred. Says the Gemara, which is worse, the first base of Mikdash or the second? At one point the Gemara says it should be obvious. The first base of Mikdash, the sins were clear and obvious, so it's much better. The second base of Mikdash, the sin was not obvious, therefore it's much worse. Why? Because if it's a sin that's obvious, you could do tshuva, you could stop it, you recognize it. The second base of Mikdash was sinas chinam. It wasn't obvious, it wasn't overt, therefore it's far worse because you can't do tshuva. That's the Gemara. I'd like to ask you the following question. What in the world does this Gemara mean? How could sinas chinam, baseless hatred, not be obvious? If I hate you, it is very, very obvious. I burn down your house. I let out your cattle. I burn your crops. I destroy your business. I'm a very, very vengeful, angry person. How could sinas chinam, baseless hatred, not be obvious? The Gemara says, oh, but those things are obvious, but hatred isn't obvious. How could hatred not be obvious? And I think if we hear the answer to this, we'll get a very interesting insight into what Lashon Harah is all about. Chofetz Chaim makes an important point. He says every single example of Lashon Harah violates an assay from the Torah. There is a mitzvah say, love your neighbor like yourself. He says very simply, if I were at all concerned for my neighbor, would I speak about him? Would I speak that way, defaming him, ruining his reputation, hurting his business, hurting the way people look at him? The fact that I speak about him that way means by definition that I'm violating v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And I'd like to give you a moshel to be masbir, to put this into perspective. Imagine the following. Imagine I discover a cloak of invisibility. I put this cloak on and you can't see me. So I put on this cloak and I go into the base medrash and I decide to have myself a grand old time. I see a chavrusa learning, and one guy looks away, I close the sefer. He looks back, what is it? I see another guy look up for a minute, I turn the sefer upside down. I take Svarim away, put him back. I'm having a grand old time. People don't know what's happening. People know what's going on, but I'm walking around the base medrash between the rows, having a fun, grand old time. After a while I get bored with just taking away Gemaras and closing them, so I decide to, let's step it up a little bit. I see a guy walking by, I stick my foot out, another guy walks by and I just punch him. Oh, hey, what's going on? Another guy, kick him in the back, smash, kick. The game is no longer so funny. You see, if you're wearing a cloak of invisibility, and because people don't see you, you hit them, you smash them, you hurt them, that's nasty, mean-spirited, and evil. Chofetz Chaim says there is a curse that applies to one who speaks Lashon Harah. Orer makeh re'ehu b'seiser. Cursed be the one who hits his neighbor in hiding. How does this apply to Lashon Harah? It says Chofetz Chaim, don't you understand? The only reason you're speaking that way is because he's not here. What is the greatest cure for Lashon Harah? When you're speaking about Plony and Plony shows up. All of a sudden, I meant that. I wasn't. What happened? You were speaking so clearly. You were being so elaborate, so detailed. The minute the guy shows up, you clam up. Why? Because if he hears you, you would never speak that way. And what that means in plain language, says the Chofetz Chaim, is every example of Lashon Harah is makeh re'ehu b'seiser. You're damaging him, you're hurting him. Why do you do it? Because he's not there, he doesn't see, and that is low down, dirty, ugly, and that's exactly why the Torah is so makbid on it. Exactly what the Rambam told us, and that is Lashon Harah are words that hurt, words that damage. You don't see the wound, you don't see a damaged body, but they're words that hurt. They're the opposite of a haftarech kamocha, and what they are is a manifestation of a lack of loving a Jew as you do yourself. And I believe that's exactly what the Gemara means. You see, if you speak Lashon Harah about another person, you don't recognize that it's baseless hatred. You don't recognize it because to you it's prattle, just an interesting story. But if you understood what you were doing is, not only don't you love him, you're hurting him. You're debasing him, destroying his reputation, maybe rooting a shidduch, maybe destroying his business. You're punching him, you're kicking him. That's sinas chinam, that's baseless hatred. But the problem is it doesn't look that way. The problem is it's just stories, just blabbing, just prattle, just telling a little bit of gossip. What's bad about gossip? I'm not saying I'm a tzaddik, but don't call me a Russia. That's exactly why when the second base of Mindless was destroyed, it was so dangerous, because the sinas chinam was hidden. No one saw it. It wasn't that people would burn their neighbor's corral. It wasn't that they burned down their houses. It was hidden. It was behind the scenes. People were speaking Lashon Harah, but Lashon Harah is exactly that, makeh re'ehu b'seiser, hitting your friend when he doesn't see, damaging him, hurting him, but it's not noticeable, and that's why it's so hard to do tshuva. And I think the first chiddush that we have to know and take, if we want to address this issue seriously, is that the Torah considers it an absolute, complete prohibition. It's not dieting. It's not watching your caloric intake. It's not watching your cholesterol. It's an Isser HaTorah, completely utterly forbidden. However, Chofetz Chaim says there's a second reason why people speak Lashon Harah. And he says this is a mistake that most people make, and once you understand that it's a mistake, it solves the problem. If you ever accuse a person of speaking Lashon Harah, I almost guarantee the first word you'll hear, it's not Lashon Harah, it's true. It's not Lashon Harah because the story is true. Says the Chofetz Chaim, halacha number 1 in his sefer is the definition of Lashon Harah is that it's true. If it's not true, it's something else. It's called Matzi Shemra. To be in the category of Lashon Harah, it must be true. You see, unlike libel in the court system, the fact that it's true doesn't take it out of the category of Lashon Harah. It puts it into that category. So once you understand that the very definition of Lashon Harah is a story that's true, it's an event that happened, Ploni really did such and such, then you're in the ballpark of understanding that's what the Torah prohibits, that's what's forbidden, and now you're in the ballpark of dealing with this Isser. And when you put this into perspective, I think it's a very different way of looking at things than we normally do. If you see a gossip mongerer, if you see a person in shul or in the neighborhood who loves to tell stories about this one and that one, know and understand that you're looking at a wicked person. He doesn't mean to be. He's not mean-spirited. He'll probably do you a great chesed, but he's violating on a regular basis dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of overt violations of prohibitions in the Torah. And what he's doing on a regular basis is far worse than feeding the Jews in Monsey Treif, because he's feeding everyone around him a constant flow of prohibitions, of losases, violating asays, and he's going exactly against the Torah's way. The vantage point to understand that is a vantage point of understanding that the Torah is really makbid about it, that it really is usr. But it takes a while to understand this. It takes a while to get it. The good news is exactly what Rashi's telling us. The reason why it's so easy to stop speaking Lashon Harah is because most of the Lashon Harah that we speak is not mean-spirited. Most of the time we don't have a vengeance to get the guy. We're not on a rampage to hurt someone. We're just speaking. Much like the tzipor, much like the bird that prattles, most of the Lashon Harah that we speak is just that, blabbing. And once we understand that the Torah says it's forbidden, it's easy to stop. Just stop the prattle. Stop the blabbing. Don't do it. The real cure long term is to study the halachas. By sitting down to study the halachas, by studying them in depth and inside, you get a much better perspective. But the first understanding that most of the time it's not mean-spirited, most of the time it's just prattle, makes it a lot easier to stop it, makes it a lot easier to prevent it. However, if you feel you need some motivation, I'd like to share with you what I consider the most motivating thing to work on Lashon Harah. The Orach HaSadikim brings us, as well as follows. There was once a chassid. A chassid is a very pious, holy Jew. And a certain person was his enemy. This person was his enemy and spoke certain words of Lashon Harah about this chassid. The chassid heard about this. What did the chassid do? He took a tray, filled the tray with the most delicious foods he could find, delicacies, fine foods, sent a messenger to bring this tray to his enemy. And when the messenger brought this tray into this chassid's enemy, the messenger said the following words: "My master sent me because he said, you sent him a present. He wants to reciprocate and send you back a present." And the Orach HaSadikim explains it to us. He says as follows: whenever you speak Lashon Harah about a person, some of the schusim that you have come off of your cheshbon and go to him. The Marpel Nefesh explains the why behind it. You see, what you've done is you've damaged that person. You hurt them, whether it be their reputation, whether it be their financial status, whether it be their honor and position in the community. You damaged them. And therefore it's only appropriate that something be taken from you. You took from them, something has to come from you to balance it out. Every time you malign a person, every time you speak Lashon Harah about a person, they take away from your schusim and give it to another person. And understanding that lets us understand the damage that's wrought. meaning from a purely selfish perspective. Forget the fact that I'm damaging another human being. Forget the fact that I'm hurting another person. If you want a motivation to work on it, think about what you're doing to yourself on a regular basis, violating losasei after losasei after losasei, on a regular basis violating assays, but on a regular basis giving up schusim, giving up merits. And it is not that easy to acquire schusim, and they're very, very easy to lose. I think there's a tremendous lesson to learn from this Rashi, and that is the human mouth is a powerful machine. Much like in the olden days, penmanship was essential because everything was written by hand. Most mitzvahs that we do are slow and sluggish. To wear tzitzit, to pick up a lulav, to put on tefillin is a slow, sluggish process. But the mouth is very, very fast. The mouth is like a high-speed printer that rattles things out. And when you're putting on tefillin, you could rattle out 4 losases, maybe 20 losases, and maybe even more, without even recognizing what you're doing. If we understand the speed with which the mouth works, and we understand that the Torah is really serious about the fact that it's a losasei, and we can understand how it's far worse than eating tray food, far worse than a caterer who feeds a community tray food, because it's a constant unending flow, a constant stream of violations of Torah principles. And in fact, each act is separate, each act is punishable, each act damages the person to a greater extent, and each act takes away from my schusim to a further extent. Let me close with one last observation, and that is as follows. There is something that has become much more effective of late, and that's something called thermal photography. Thermal photography is a way of measuring heat fields that emanate from different things. A thermal photographic camera can detect heat that's coming from different sources. So for instance, it's used by people who sell insulation. They'll bring it to your house and show you where there are heat leaks, places where the heat is clearly leaving your house. You'll see an entire image of your house, but instead of seeing the bricks and the covering, you just see the heat and the cold spot, and you could identify exactly where the heat is coming out. It's also used by firemen. Sometimes they'll go into a smoky building and they can't find the little child hiding under the mattress. They put on this camera and it only sees heat. The average room temperature will be at a certain point, the human body is at a different point, and you could see the image of the little child hiding under the bed, and it saved many a children. Okay. Now this concept of thermal photography, I think, has some real relevance to us. The Beis Yosef wrote a sefer, Magid Misharim, of what the Magid told him. There was a malach who came to him and taught him on a regular basis sodos, certain secrets. And the malach said to him as follows: when people speak Lashon Harah, they don't understand it. I watch, and to me, it looks like they're spending their gold and their silver. When their mouth opens, it's like they're spitting out diamonds, gold, and silver is what they're spitting out. And I believe what the Beis Yosef was learning from the Magid was a very interesting concept. If we had a thermal photography of people when they speak, and we would watch Lashon Harah, what we would see is schusim, merit after merit that are being given away. It takes an awful lot of work to acquire merit. It takes an awful lot of work to learn. It takes an awful lot of work to give tzedakah. It takes an awful lot of work to do chesed. And you open your mouth and that high-speed printer starts gold and silver. If we would be able to see that image the way the Malach saw it, people giving away gold and silver, we would clamp our tongue shut, we would close our mouth and never open it again. The problem is we don't see it that way. We view it as prattle, we view it as irrelevant, just a story, just an event. And what the Torah is teaching us is, you're right. That's the cause. Much like that bird that chirps, that's how most human beings speak, but that's not what the Torah considers the essence of what's going on. What's really going on is you're damaging another human being, hurting their reputation, hurting their position and their standing, and the Torah considers that a very grave violation of principles for which you're held accountable, for which you give up your schusim, and in fact understanding this gives us a very different perspective. May Hashem grant us the wisdom, understanding, ability to put this into practice.